Why do we suffer? It's not a question reserved for philosophers or poets. It's a question that lives inside each of us, quietly, persistently. From the moment we become aware of ourselves, we become aware of our vulnerability. We feel hunger. We lose people we love. We experience failure, isolation, grief. Sometimes suffering arrives suddenly, in a phone call, a diagnosis, an accident. Other times it's quiet and slow, a dull ache, a hollow feeling, an absence we can't name. Suffering is a condition of being alive, and no one escapes it. And yet across traditions and centuries, thinkers have asked, does suffering have meaning? Is it simply something to endure, or does it have the power to awaken us, reshape us, teach us something essential? We may not be able to eliminate suffering, but perhaps we can learn to relate to it differently. And in doing so, we may begin to transform not just our pain, but the way we understand what it means to live. In this video, we will explore two radically different, and yet in many ways deeply complementary, visions of suffering. The first comes from the East, the Buddha, who saw suffering not as punishment, but as a natural result of our attachment to what is impermanent and our ignorance of the true nature of reality. For him, suffering could be overcome, not by escaping life, but by awakening to its truth. The second comes from the West, Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychiatrist who endured the horrors of Auschwitz and came to believe that even in the face of unimaginable pain, life retains meaning, if we choose to respond with dignity, courage, and purpose. One invites us to dissolve the roots of suffering through inner clarity and detachment. The other invites us to walk through suffering with open eyes and an open heart, transforming it into a source of strength. Two traditions, two languages, two temperaments, but both ask the same question: what do we do with our pain? We will not find easy answers here. This is not a video of quick fixes or empty comfort. It is an invitation, a turning inward, because suffering is not something we analyze from a distance. It lives in us. It shapes how we breathe, how we love, how we walk through the world. True understanding begins when we stop trying to run from pain and begin to listen to what it's asking of us. The Buddha listened and found liberation. Frankl listened and found meaning. They did not escape suffering. They entered it deeply, and through that encounter, they uncovered something universal, that suffering can be the very door to awakening, if we dare to walk through it. So in this video, we don't seek conclusions. We seek depth. We seek honesty. We seek presence. Because perhaps, in understanding why we suffer, we begin, little by little, to understand what it means to be truly human. At the heart of the Buddha's teaching lies a framework that is as simple as it is profound: the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is the recognition of suffering, not just physical pain, but a deeper existential dissatisfaction, a sense that something is always missing, that even joy is fleeting, that nothing ever quite lasts. The second truth identifies the cause: craving, our thirst for pleasure, control, permanence, and identity. We want life to be stable in a world that is constantly changing. The third truth offers hope. The cessation of suffering is possible. It is not a fantasy. It is a path. And the fourth truth shows us that path, the Noble Eightfold Path, a way of living grounded in ethical action, mental discipline, and clear insight. These truths are not beliefs to be accepted, but realities to be investigated through our own life, our own mind, our own pain. For the Buddha, much of our suffering arises because we resist the fundamental nature of reality: impermanence. Everything changes: our bodies, our relationships, our thoughts, even our sense of identity. Yet we cling. We grasp at what is fleeting as if it could last forever. We build our lives around things that are destined to pass away. And when they do, we feel betrayed, as if something unnatural had happened. But it is not life that has broken a promise. It is our expectation of permanence that was the illusion. Closely tied to this is the concept of non-self, the idea that there is no fixed, permanent I at the center of our experience. The self, as we perceive it, is a collection of changing processes, thoughts, sensations, emotions, memories. When we mistake that fluid process for a solid identity, we suffer. To realize impermanence and non-self is not to become detached from life, but to become free to live with clarity, compassion, and peace. The Buddha did not teach us to reject suffering. He taught us to listen to it. He saw suffering not only as a symptom of illusion, but also as a teacher, a messenger. When we stop running from our pain and begin to observe it calmly, honestly, we begin to see its causes. We see how craving twists the mind. We see how resistance creates tension. In that seeing, something begins to shift. We stop blaming others. We stop blaming life. We soften. We open. And in that opening, compassion arises, not just for ourselves, but for all beings who, like us, long for peace, but often live in confusion. This compassion is not pity. It is born from understanding. It is the natural response of a mind that sees clearly. The Buddha invites us to make peace with suffering, not by numbing ourselves, but by transforming our relationship to it. To suffer consciously is not weakness. It is the beginning of awakening. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, a doctor of the mind, but the insights that shaped his life and work came not from clinical studies or academic research. They came from the unimaginable suffering of a concentration camp. In Auschwitz, he lost everything: his wife, his parents, his freedom, his dignity. He was reduced to a number, a body among thousands, surviving on scraps of bread and the hope that tomorrow might come. And yet, even in that abyss, something survived within him. The power to choose how he would respond. Frankl realized that although he had no control over his external circumstances, he still had control over his inner world. This realization became the cornerstone of his thought, that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. It is a quiet freedom, not dramatic or loud, but it is real. In the midst of horror, Frankl chose to find meaning, and in that choice he found his humanity. From the ashes of that suffering, Frankl gave birth to a new approach to healing: logotherapy. Unlike Freud, who emphasized the pursuit of pleasure, or Adler, who focused on the will to power, Frankl believed that the deepest human drive is the will to meaning. He observed that people could endure unimaginable hardship, physical pain, emotional trauma, even the loss of everything they held dear, if they felt that their suffering had purpose. For Frankl, life was not something that owed us happiness, but something that asked something of us. And the answer to that call could be found in three main ways: through creative action, through deep love, and through the attitude we take when faced with unavoidable suffering. He believed that every human being, even in despair, retained the freedom to say yes to life, not in spite of pain, but through it. Logotherapy was not just a therapy, it was a declaration that meaning is possible, even in the darkest places. For Frankl, suffering was not something to avoid at all costs. It was something to face, and through facing it, to grow. He taught that when we are no longer able to change our external situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is where he located true freedom, not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. He called this the last of the human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's attitude, even in the face of fate. This was not a philosophical abstraction. Frankl lived it in the camps, where some perished in spirit long before their bodies did, and others preserved a quiet dignity in the midst of horror. To suffer with purpose, he believed, was to rise above despair. It was to turn agony into meaning and humiliation into moral strength. In this way, suffering becomes not a defeat, but a doorway to transcendence. It asks us, who will you become when everything is stripped away but your soul? Buddha and Frankl stand on opposite sides of the world, culturally, historically, spiritually. One was a renunciant who sat beneath a tree in silence. The other, a survivor who walked through the ashes of a genocide, and yet both confronted suffering not as something meaningless, but as something worthy of attention, of inquiry, of transformation. Buddha teaches that suffering arises from illusion, from the mistaken belief that anything, including the self, can remain fixed in a world of constant change. He offers a path of awakening that dissolves suffering at its root, through insight, through detachment, through presence. Frankl, by contrast, does not seek to end suffering, but to elevate it, to give it dignity and purpose. Where Buddha seeks liberation, Frankl seeks meaning. One releases, the other affirms, but neither denies pain. Both understand that suffering is not a detour from life. It is the very terrain through which we discover who we are. Perhaps we don't need to choose between them. There are moments in life when the teachings of the Buddha offer exactly what we need: space to breathe, to observe, to release the inner knots of craving and fear. And there are other moments when Frankl's voice becomes our guide, urging us to stand upright in the storm, to hold meaning close to our chest, and to respond to pain with purpose. The truth is that suffering wears many faces, and we meet it in different ways throughout our journey. What matters is not whether we escape it or conquer it, but how we relate to it, with resistance or with presence, with despair or with depth. Buddha shows us the way out. Frankl shows us the way through. And in listening to both, we may begin to hear a third voice, our own, a voice that learns slowly to make peace with pain, to transform it not into silence, but into wisdom. In everyday life, suffering rarely announces itself with drama. It comes quietly, in the form of anxiety we can't name, a conversation that leaves us hollow, a morning we wake up feeling heavy without knowing why. These are not the grand tragedies of life, but the subtle moments where we're invited to turn inward. The Buddha would ask, what are you clinging to? Is it a relationship, an image of who you think you should be, a future that hasn't arrived? Frankl would ask, what meaning can you bring to this? Can this discomfort push you toward growth or toward someone in need? Together, they offer a way to meet pain with depth, not by reacting, but by pausing, by listening. And in that pause, we begin to shift our relationship with suffering, from something that controls us to something that teaches us. The pain may still be there, but we are no longer its prisoner. To live the teachings of Buddha and Frankl is not to avoid pain. It is to approach it with courage and clarity. From the Buddha, we learn to loosen the knots of craving, to sit with discomfort without resistance, and to see that we are not our thoughts nor our fears. From Frankl we learn to take a stand, to affirm life even when it hurts, to choose meaning in moments when we feel powerless, to act with integrity even in darkness. Some days we will need silence and detachment. Other days we will need engagement and resolve. Both are sacred. There is no formula, only attention. And in that attention, we begin to see that suffering is not always a punishment, nor a failure. It is a call to be present, to open, to respond. Not perfectly, but honestly, because presence is what turns pain into insight, and insight is what turns suffering into awakening. What do you do with your suffering? Do you try to silence it, ignore it, escape it, or have you ever dared to sit with it, to listen, to ask what it might be trying to teach? Do you lean more toward the way of Buddha, observing, releasing, dissolving illusion? Or do you find strength in Frankl's path, facing the pain, holding on to meaning, transforming it into purpose? There is no right answer, only your answer. If any part of this journey spoke to your experience, leave a comment. Share your reflections, your questions, your silence, and if you feel called, subscribe. We will continue exploring the questions that don't have easy answers, but that lead us, step by step, to a deeper life. One of presence, one of truth, one of meaning.